to assess the progress of implementation of the directive, to develop service models, to foster interagency cooperation, and to raise awareness for victims' rights. Since the landscape of victim protection in Germany is quite, let's say, complex, we as a German partner have focused on victim protection of victims of right-wing, racial and xenophobic violence and other forms of group-based misanthropy. Because we've had some major incidents in Germany over the recent years. So they say that these types of attacks are like have a seasonal highs and lows, so to speak. There's concerted media attention for certain periods, and then it goes down when nothing happens, but it's still there as a serious phenomenon. And the Victims Directive has actually highlighted these groups of victims as a group that is basically concerned with the special vulnerability. And just to highlight that aspect, I'm going to just read very quickly this one passage in the EU directive, which is almost 10 years old now, where it says victims of hate crime tend to experience a high rate of secondary and repeat victimization, of intimidation and of retaliation. Particular care should be taken when assessing whether such victims are at risk of such victimization, intimidation, and of retaliation, and there should be a strong assumption, a presumption, that those victims will benefit from special protective measures. So confronting victim support organizations with a particular challenge here, but not only the agencies, but also, or the nonprofits, but also, of course, the government agencies. And in the recent evaluation, if the Victim Directive has been implemented, this was highlighted once again as a particular target group in the EU strategy on victims' rights, focusing on the next upcoming 5 years. It says, the strength of the EU is its diversity. Therefore, the EU will do what it can to prevent and combat hate crime in all its forms, including racial, anti-Semitic, homophobic, or transphobic hate crime. Now, given this context, we in a project setting, we looked at the EU directive and focused on, which is basically revolving around these 6 areas of rights, which is the right of victims' family members, rights to understand and be understood, the right to information, the right to support, the right to participate in criminal proceedings, and the right to protection and individual assessment. In our project, we conducted numerous interviews with stakeholders and professionals to assess the level and degree of implementation of these rights, but we were also required and encouraged to assess victims' voices on how victims themselves perceive the implementation of these rights. And in the process, while doing our interviews, we had the chance to encounter the NGO SeRV, which was founded by Kai Stoltmann, who today is not only a founder, but one of the leading figures and also a counselor. So he has also the base kind of line experience of interacting with victims. And they had created a very, innovative exhibit in which they had interviewed victims and portraying victims' voices, which now I would like to hand over to Kai to give us a little bit of an impression of the context of how the exhibit was evolved, and give us some snippets of the content, which some of you might have already seen previously. So I'll hand over to you, Kai, and I'm going to close this.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to everybody. First of all, of course, I want to say thank you for the invitation to the conference and yeah, say thank you for the possibility to talk about our work and this exhibition today. I will also share a presentation with you because, you know, as it's an exhibition, it depends a lot on the visuals, if you want it that way. And today I will share within the next few minutes the most important information about this exhibition and, of course, about our specialized support services for victims of right-wing, racist and anti-Semitic attacks here in Schleswig-Holstein. Most of you won't know what Schleswig-Holstein is. It's basically a federal state in the north of Germany with about 2.9 million inhabitants. It borders Denmark to the North Sea to the west, and the Baltic Sea to the east. And throughout the country, we offer psychosocial counseling, and we provide information about legal options, like, for example, filling a police report, civil action, and protection of victims. Furthermore, we accompany the victims to the police, to authorities, officials, doctors, and lawyers. And we work closely with lawyers who are specialized in our field. We provide information on financial support options, for example, legal aid and compensation payments. And if the victims need assistance with the application process, we help them with this as well. So we arrange support from other counseling centers, and if necessary, we give provision of psychotherapeutic programs. For example, some refugees need support regarding their residence status, and we cannot offer that kind of support ourselves, but at least we can give them information on how to find organizations that help refugees. And well, last but not least, we can offer help with public relations. We do all this kind of work with a team which now consists of 5 social workers and social scientists. To share the perspective of our clients with the public, we created this exhibition we are talking about today. And our exhibition aims to present the emotions of those affected by right-wing attacks and hate crimes and to give them a voice. This way, the focus is to be shifted away from the perpetrators to the perspective of victims. Because usually after right-wing attacks, the media focuses on the perpetrators, and too often the media just copies the police report, and the police, of course, focuses on finding and punishing the perpetrators. So usually there are a lot of articles about the biographies and motivations of the perpetrators, but unfortunately the victims do not get the same kind of public attention. And this gives rise to negative psychological, social, and economic consequences that do not result directly from the crime itself. Instead, they are caused by the actions and words of the people who interact with the victims after the attack, like, for example, parents, teachers, the police, courts. And this phenomenon might be familiar to you. It's called secondary victimization. And from our point of view, our society is responsible for a social mood that too often encourages people to commit racist and right-wing attacks. And at the same time, we are responsible to help and support the victims. That's why we try to not only counsel and support them, but also raise their visibility by telling their stories and, yeah, in the end, create solidarity for them. So within the last few days, you were already able to kind of visit a digital version of our exhibition, The Fear Haunts Us Until Today, which is a quote of one of the people we interviewed. And altogether, you can see how the exhibition looks here, or at least a part of it. Altogether, the exhibition contains 10 interviews with victims of right-wing attacks who were supported by Zebra during the last few years. That way, our exhibition complements previously existing exhibitions by other organizations and by other counseling centers that, for example, focus on the fate of people who were killed by right-wing attacks. It shows how differently such violence can occur in everyday situations and what the consequences are. And of course, it can be moved to different locations like school or social centers, cultural centers easily. At the moment, it is on display in a high school because, you know, most cultural centers are closed due to the pandemic. And so that's the reason why we're showing it in a high school at the moment. I brought along 3 exhibition boards just as examples for those who did not visit the virtual exhibition beforehand. And the thing you have to know is that basically the exhibition is based on conversations we had with the victims. We asked them what happened to them and how they felt after the attack. In many of the interviews, the victims told us how long they had to struggle with their experiences and how severe these consequences were. And most of the victims were actually really keen on telling their stories. So we asked them to name an object that had something to do with the attack, and we took pictures of these objects and decided to kind of detach the objects from the actual attacks and present them in a way you might recognize from advertisements, for example. That way, the objects kind of speak for themselves, and most of the times you first have to read the interview to understand the connection between the object and the right-wing attack. The first example we're talking about right now took place in 2018 when 2 young refugees were partying in a club. After one of them was pushed several times, a brawl breaks out and the police are called in. The police did not suspect the perpetrators, but the young man, the young refugee. And on the way home, the 2 refugees are again physically attacked by the same group. And the victim, Kali, it's his name, he himself describes the situation like this. We ran back to the disco and asked the taxi drivers there for help, but they ignored us. Only after we had spoken to several people, we were able to call the police. When the police arrived on the scene, they weren't really interested in what had just happened to us. They didn't even get out of a car, although I told them that I was afraid and that the perpetrators said that they knew where I lived. So that's basically how he describes the situation after the attack itself. And the consequences he puts in his own words, like the first few months after the attack was the hardest time in my life, although I had already experienced many bad things in my home country. I was very scared, which also manifested itself physically. Then there was a knock at my flat. I was afraid that the group would reappear. When I closed my eyes, I see the incident back in front of me and have to think about it over and over again. So that's kind of a few of the words that Carly told us about the attack he had to experience. And as you can see on the top left, he chose an apple as the object he asked us to take a picture of. And he decided that an apple symbolizes the attack because during the attack on him, he was hit so hard in the face that he could not chew and eat properly afterwards. Which kind of already leads us to the second example. In the district of Segeberg, which is a rural area here, an extreme right-wing group was established or has established itself in 2019. And to this extreme right-wing group, numerous attacks are attributed. Several citizens of a nearby community came together in October 2019 to remove right-wing stickers of this group. And during this cleaning campaign, some of the participants were physically attacked and injured. And we talked to Nadja and Karsten and asked them to describe their experience. And Nadja said, a man from the group shouted at me and said to Karsten that he would also get some. Karsten kind of added, immediately after the threat, he turned around and sprayed irritant gas in my face. After that, he hit me several times. Luckily, Nadja had the right intuition. And she said, I had the bucket from our cleaning operation in my hand and I poured it over the attacker. That upset him so much that he and his companions fled. So as you can see on the picture, you can actually see the bucket that Nadja used to pour the water over the attacker. And even though she was able to end the attack this way, it still had ongoing effects on her and Karsten. And she said about this effects, the following months were a very bad time, which I would never want to experience again. These neo-Nazis had threatened us in a very concrete way, and we knew how violent these people were. We really waited for the threatened house visits because the perpetrators were still in the same place, and that led to me thinking about moving away. So just as an addition, the perpetrators also said that they kind of knew where we lived and they would be visiting them at home and attacking them again. And Karsten added, the group kept trying to gain more ground over here and they were very present. The first time was really hard with a lot of panic and little sleep. Here you can see the consequences and ongoing consequences I talked about earlier. And you will actually find these kind or similar kind of consequences again at the third example. Because the last example took place in December 2017. A refugee was attacked by two women at a bus stop and pushed to the ground in the middle of the day. And the two attackers had previously spoken negatively about refugees, and the woman who was attacked suffered several injuries and can only move her hand to a very limited extent up to this day. And she described the situation like this: I was totally exhausted mentally. I was afraid and restless. Until today, I'm afraid to be at the station where I was attacked. Furthermore, I still can't hold anything with my injured hand and I can't move it properly. Apart from the physical problems, I also suffer from the psychological consequences. I have anxiety attacks and I am no longer able to cope with my everyday life on my own. In this case, actually, nobody called the police, and it was a doctor at the hospital who told her son to do so. And she goes on with the words, "My son went to the station and filed a report, but nothing happens. The police did not even come to ask me what happened. It was only 2 years later that the police invited me to testify." So the victim has to pass by this very bus stop where she was attacked quite often because it's on her way to work. And for her, this bus represents the fact that she cannot forget the attack actually till the very day. So now you've heard a few things about our exhibition, and I hope that you have a first impression about the stuff we're doing, both about the work where we're like supporting the victims itself, and of course about the way how we try to raise awareness and create solidarity for them by with this kind of exhibition. And some of you might have already had a look at it before the side event, so I'm actually really looking forward to our discussion now. And of course, you can find more information about us and about our work on our website. I think that's enough for the beginning of this side event. And yeah, thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for the discussion now.
Thank you so much. Those were two very interesting presentations, and it really shows the impact that hate crimes can have on a victim's life. Svenja, I believe that your presentation included some questions to our audience.
Yes, it did. However, I think we could maybe get some feedback first on the exhibit, or some thoughts, if there are any in the group. Otherwise, we could probe with some discussion questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you experience any specific needs from group to group, because these are all largely, they can be grouped together as right-wing attacks, but of course the type of attack also differs from victim to victim. I can imagine that the impact and the type of violence that you experience when you deal with anti-Semitism is different than with transphobia, for instance. So I wondered what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You were right. Of course, the needs are different from victim to victim. I would say usually we don't see specific needs for certain groups, but what we have quite often are, let's say, needs that are depend more or less on the situation that people are living in general. For example, within the last year, due to the lockdown, of course, hit everybody, but it had an even stronger impact on refugees who were, if they had experienced racist attacks, and then they were additionally in the refugee camp, which they basically couldn't leave. It was really hard for them to organize people who helped them as translators, or who helped them to accompany them to the court or to the police. So in this case, you have basically certain specific needs that I would say belong to a group of victims. Or for example, if you have attacks against politicians who are being attacked because they stand for democratic values. They usually have lots of resources, not in a financial way, but also in a social way or in a personal way, which they can use to get over the attack and kind of deal with the consequences. For example, if a politician gets attacked, usually it's quite easy for him or her to get a lawyer. You know, they have lawyers anyway, and they just have to call them and say, hey, something happened, and they will get help. Or most of them won't have trouble if they get threatened online to finance a lawyer because they will have the money. So I would say in most cases, it's not actually specific needs that depend from group to group, but it's more about the resources that the victims have to deal with the problems. And of course, you have certain groups which in average have more social, personal, and financial resources which they can use to deal with such an attack. For example, you said transphobic attacks, which are part of the cases which we are counseling as well. Altogether, attacks against LGBTIQ, and within this group, you have totally different life situations, I would say, but usually the wishes and the needs depend more from person to person. We have people who say like, okay, I really don't want to talk about the attack again, and I don't want to be remembered at all that the thing happened. And others say, I want to talk to the press. I want that everybody hears about it, and I want to raise attention. It's totally different. Sometimes if a group of people gets attacked, like for example a family or a group of friends, you even have like big differences within this between 3 or 4 people that get attacked at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Alexandra posted a question in the chat as well. She wanted to know what the reactions to the exhibition were, and how many people have seen it, and if you have received feedback from the viewers and participants to the exhibition.
Yes. That's actually 2 or 3 questions, and I will try to answer them one after another.
She has her way of trying to combine questions.
Well, the reactions so far were really positive. On the side of the victims who we asked to participate, as well as on by the people who visited it. Most people we asked if they wanted to join the project were really like saying yes immediately. Some asked us to not state their real name, for example, or don't give the city they're living in, and of course it's always been a possibility to change the name, for example. I don't actually know how many people have seen it, because usually it's you know, it's in places where it's more or less on public display, and people just can go there and have a look at it. Within the last few weeks, we, for example, had it in the city center of Flensburg. Flensburg is the city next to Denmark. And the exhibition was in a former supermarket on the outside of glassed windows, so that you could actually just have a look at it from the outside, because we said due to the pandemic it's kind of difficult to place it inside, so we put it in a way that you can visit it from the streets. And that way we can't actually say how many people have seen it, but we had it presented for the first time November last year, and now it's already been to 4 or 5 different places, and we have already people who asked to get it till next February. So there's definitely enough people who want to get the exhibition. I would say rent, but it's for free, so rent is not really the right word. And based on this kind of feedback, I would say that probably if people want to like share it and present it, other people want to visit it as well.
That's really great to hear that there's such a large interest in the exhibition too, so that people are really interested in raising awareness on this topic. I see Antonio has his hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the very interesting presentations. Just one question. Listening to the episodes you presented, and it seems that right-wing attacks are not always taken seriously by the police. Is that so? And if yes, can you elaborate a bit on what you perceive as lacking on the police side when it comes to these specific crimes?
The experiences with the police are very different from victim to victim. We have some who tell us afterwards that they were really happy and that they have a feeling they've been taken seriously and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, we have victims who tell us they were told to go away, that whatever they wanted to report is not severe enough to file a police report and all this kind of stuff. And I would say that it depends on a few different factors. For example, the police officer who's at the station at the moment. It depends for sure on the question who is going there and who is accompanying the victim. For example, a lot of time people or the victims tell us that when they have to go there more than once, they are not taken seriously at the first appointment. They come to us, we accompany them, and we don't actually say that much. But just by the fact that we're in the room with them, the whole situation changes, and the police officers tend to treat the victims more respectfully than they would without us. Did this already answer your question?
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay.
Thank you. And with that, I have a follow-up question. How do you gain a victim's trust? As, for example, I think it was the first example where you have this refugee who was a victim of a hate crime and following that a victim of secondary victimization by the police who thought he was the perpetrator, I assume such a person would lose all trust in the system or even the country he is in at that point. How would you gain the trust of such a person, since you are also an organization in that specific country?
Well, I would say there's a step before the question of how we gain the trust, and it's how we get in touch with the victims in the first place, because usually we're not in our office waiting for them to call us. That would hardly happen. Instead, it's more that we hear about this kind of attacks, and then we try to reach the victims and offer our services. For example, we read in the newspapers or in social media about incidents or in police reports. We're in touch with other NGOs, with communities. And once we hear about an incident that might be an attack, for example, it's just a newspaper saying that there was a fight between two young people at the station. We try to get in touch with them by calling social workers, by calling youth centers, by whoever is in town, and try to like offer our services. Once we made the contact, we assure them that everything they tell us will be treated confidentially, of course, and that we are on the side of the victims. So we explain them really in the first few minutes that nothing will happen without their consent, and we are not kind of in a neutral position between the perpetrators and the victims, but instead we are really on their side. And that's usually the two things that are necessary to gain the trust. Of course, the loss of faith in the state itself, in the police, in the society, is an issue several times, and usually, the victims. As soon as they understand that we are really on their side, the trust is there again. So, but I would always say that it's important to be an independent NGO and an independent organization. We couldn't do the same kind of work we're doing if we were a part of the state. Of course, we get money from the state and we get paid for the state. I mean, at the moment, it's 5 people, as I told you, and we're really doing nothing else. And so we couldn't just do this kind of work in our free time. We just need some kind of financing, but it's always important that even with the financing from the state, if you get the funding from the state, you're still in an independent position.
Yeah, that's understandable. Thank you. I see we have another question from Alexandra regarding the exhibition, whether it's only telling stories from Germany or also other countries, and whether there's a difference in approaches or experience.
It's only telling stories from Schleswig-Holstein, so from the really northern part of Germany, which is kind of a consequence of how the our counseling system works. So for victims of right-wing attacks and hate crimes, in every federal state you have an NGO like Zebra, and so we are only in touch with people from our federal state, and this way we wouldn't have we wouldn't be in touch with victims from, I don't know, other parts of Germany. And that's the reason why we were only telling stories from Schleswig-Holstein. There's actually one exception, which is a arson on a mosque in another city or in another part of Germany, but the victims moved to Schleswig-Holstein afterwards, and that's how they got in touch with us. And I actually don't know what you mean with any difference in approaches or experiences. Could you explain that, please?
Alex, is your mic working right now? I assume she meant if you also had examples from other countries, whether there are differences in that.
No, actually we don't. I know that there's an organization, kind of an umbrella organization for all these counseling centers, and they have more a German-wide approach. They don't do the counseling itself, but they do a lot of on public relations, for example, and on exchange with other countries. And they have at the moment a project which connects with counseling centers in other countries. But that way we have some exchange with them every once in a while, but usually that's just not the focus of our work.
I see her microphone is still not working, but also depending on the victim, although that has been addressed at least in a part before. So I assume maybe the approach differs depending on the victim. But that has been addressed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The approach depends on the victim each and every time, and you could see that on the time we are in touch with them. So, for example, sometimes we a counseling is 1 or 2 appointments. We the victim has certain questions. We can answer the questions in a short amount of time, and after that everything is fine, and the victim says to us, okay, thanks for your help, but that's all I need. That's totally fine for us. In other cases, we might get in touch with them right after the attack. After that, we do the psychosocial support. We talk with them about safety issues. We accompany them to the police. Then the whole process starts, which from the moment you go to the police station for the first time till the court, it takes years. And through all this time, we might stay in touch. We help finding a therapy. We we help with with compensation payments, which also take a really long time till you get an answer. And so sometimes it's 2 appointments, sometimes it's 3 years till the end of our counseling process. And that shows you how different actually the approaches are depending on the individual needs.
Yeah. And a follow-up question.
Of online hate. Yes, we do. If the hate is addressed at a specific person. So, for example, if you have somebody that posts online, I don't know, something against gays in general, or against refugees in general, or against homeless people in general. That's not from the way we understand what we're doing, is not an attack which is directed at a person. But if we have, if somebody experienced online hate in a way that somebody writes you, I will find you and I will kill you, or whatever, you know, that's directed at a person himself or herself, and that's the place where we start to support them. And of course, we don't actually make a difference if this kind of threats were addressed offline or online, because the consequences on the victim from our experiences are more or less the same. And that's the reason why we say, okay, we for us it doesn't matter if the victims are addressed or threatened online or offline.
Okay, and so would you say that, for example, when someone makes a general statement like about refugees, for example, since that may incite violence, would that then be a police matter?
A police matter?
Because it's still hate speech, because it triggers violence against.
Sure, and I don't want to say that it's not dangerous in any way or something. It's I just want to say that we support victims who are threatened themselves, and not in a general manner, I would say, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And actually, for us, it's not really that much important. It's not really that important if the attack is can be if you can file a police report for it, because sometimes you have, especially online, you have things where people feel threatened, and but it's not actually a threat in a legal from a legal point of view, but nevertheless people feel threatened, and of course we would support them anyway. So
yeah, that's understandable. So as long as a person feels victimized, you are there for them, basically.
Yes.
Okay. And another question from Alexandra. She doesn't even need a microphone. She will just keep on. Do you have referral protocols with other organizations or the police?
No, we don't. Even though we refer to other organizations a lot. And it depends on the victim how we do so. For example, if I have somebody sitting in front of me who found a way to SeRV himself, and the person tells me like, okay, I just need the address and I can just call them and go there by myself. When I don't actually need to do that much. Usually you just have to like say which organizations exist or how the victim can find them. That's actually, from my point of view, that's the best way. If I don't tell them which organizations exist, but instead give them the way to find them themselves. On the other hand, there are victims which we are counseling that wouldn't be able to like get in touch with referral organizations by themselves, and then we sometimes really might tell them about it. They say, okay, I really want to go there. We ask them like, okay, do you want us to make the call for you? We call the organization, we arrange the appointment, we accompany the victim at least to the first appointment with the other organization, and after that we know, okay, now the connection is made, and they, from now on, it's not our responsibility anymore in a certain way.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from the public? Eckart, you can just unmute yourself.
Yes, it's more an internal question, because we had contact before and had an interview with the SeRV people. But I was wondering to what extent you have the need for language help in terms of communication with people from a refugee background, from different refugee backgrounds, from different origins. And so it seems to be, what we know also from other interviews with service providers, seems to be a big issue.
It is, and we have translators, which we just, a network of translators, which we can just bring to the appointments, and which really help us to actually do kind of work we're doing. I think it would be just impossible to do it without them.
And do they get paid by you, or how is the financing structure?
Yes, we pay them, and so for the victims, everything we offer is for free.
Okay, but you have a funding scheme for translation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
exactly. Yeah.
That's what I did not know. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions about the exhibition or right-wing extremism? Maybe now is a good time to ask your questions, Svenja.
Yeah, maybe just one quick question. Kai, you have to leave a little bit earlier, correct? Or should we?
Yeah, I said that I have to leave at 4, which is basically in a minute.
Yes, that's what I thought. I was looking at the watch. I thought he's out in a minute. So I don't know if you want to say a final closure word before you.
Otherwise, I would just say thank you for your attention and for all the questions. And I know that the other 3 are going on with their part of the presentation and with their questions and part of the discussion, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the idea.
So thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, actually, it would be a big. Oh, Alexandra. No. Oh, it says bye. Okay, I thought has a question. Yeah, it would have been much nicer to have him around for the next session. These are just a few questions to this group of people, which since I only know few of them, I'm not sure to what extent you are involved, or if you are servicing this this target group of victims by any chance, or if you work in a totally different setting. So I would like to just highlight these questions as a, let me see. Now, how do I mean, I can read them too. I don't even need to, because it's always irritating if you have the screen in front of you. Maybe just this somehow probably relates to other victims groups as well. We've talked about the victims' voices, and actually that's part of our EU project too, to focus on these voices and to see what is a good tool. We've seen this exhibition. It has been on site in various places now due to Corona. It wasn't as easy to visit these places. We have put it online, which was a virtual exhibit, which is a totally new access. And I think we've just seen, what did you say, Gloria, over 100 clicks on it, which is in this short period of time quite significant already, I would say. So I guess social media definitely plays an important role. And Kai was talking about, this shift from the perpetrator's perspective, which used to be very dominant in Germany. I don't know how this is in your respective countries. And to raise visibility, he was talking about solidarity, empowerment, awareness raising. We were just curious to see what your experiences are, if you're working directly with victims or if it's more on a policy level. Because we as researchers have tried to get in contact with victims, and not only in Germany, but in all those partner countries, these 5 partner countries. And we've all been struggling to a certain extent to get in touch with the argument of saying, well, we do not want to re-traumatize the victim through going to another interview or. So I think there have been negative experiences in the past through media requests and similar, attempts to kind of portray the victim, and that how do you leave the person afterwards? So I think this exhibit is quite empowering in many ways, and I think this idea of solidarity creation as well. So we were just curious to see how you, what's your thoughts on that? How could one promote further the idea of victims' voices, and with that also targeting the programs and the models a little bit more towards their needs. I'm not sure if this is anything you can okay. Guess there's not
anyone. Well, then I'll start. Okay. I think it's really important, especially in these types of attacks that are often, especially right-wing attacks are often not really targeted at that specific person, but mainly just because they are a member of a certain group.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that is, they also, the perpetrators will often dehumanize victims in their head. So by highlighting victim stories, you give them back their humanity, and you might even raise awareness among perpetrators or would-be perpetrators that these are also people in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. And also this, the fears, as you just pointed out, I mean, just by being, having certain physical features or whatever to have the potential of being re-victimized, and that additional fear, that's what we encountered in all these interviews as well. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I work for Victim Support the Netherlands, and we do get approached from time to time by specific people doing research into specific victim types or specific victimization, sometimes with the aim to just get figures, but sometimes also specifically to improve policy. And we do really struggle with what you just mentioned, that we are a support organization and we cannot just connect people through with our clients, not knowing in what stage of their of their development they are, in what stage of their processing the trauma they are. It's very hard for us to screen who would be harmed by participating in such a study, and for whom it perhaps could be empowering or a step to give to help and to take back control, because that can also be a very positive experience.
Absolutely.
Especially if you get big studies who would like access to hundreds of victims. That is incredibly difficult. And I do notice that therefore we err on the side of caution a lot, because we're just our first responsibility is to take good care of our clients. So we don't necessarily have the room for error to run the risk. But that also means that it's very difficult to get good insight into what these specific groups need.
I think that's so key, and I think in the end, as sad as it might be, but the voices, the stories, the individualized stories at times are so much more powerful, because that's what people can relate to. So I guess one needs to find that kind of middle ground between being a tabloid kind of story, and that's why I felt this idea of this exhibit, of the symbol, and describing the symbol was very respectful and yet touching, so we've been wondering, I mean, if it's I don't know if I should say, I mean, what you just described, that some victim support groups almost quite protective of their clients, so I mean, you have to, based on some of the reasons you're just pointing out, but sometimes I think they're not even being asked because of the fear that this might be traumatizing. So maybe this is something, I mean, we as researchers can say that because we don't have the immediate contact, but maybe something to think about, to at least ask and see.
Yes, but let me just add one thought I have on this, because we were discussing about this also yesterday, and I'm relatively sure that if Kai would still be here, he would say that they are careful about all kinds of instrumentalization of the voices in any direction, either research or policies or so. They are simply careful. That would be his statement, I guess, because I heard a speech of a neighbored organization, and they were saying exactly that in a week ago or something. This is one thing. I think they are completely careful at a stage, and we do not have. That's one thought, and the other thought is they have built trust to these people. I think you realize during this exhibition they had interviews with the agencies they had trust with, so they were able to get the voices and to do an exhibition on this and to build trust. And I would say research agencies nearly never can do this, never. It might be because Svenja had another experience with another project more on women's issues and gender violence, and she had a contact person who offering her some context, and this made it a bit easier, but still it's very difficult to get a real good trustworthy relationship from the outside, I would say. And I think this would be key. And we have had so many demands from funding agencies like the European Commission on projects saying, come on, do interviews with victims, give us voices, but it's so complicated, and all of these people who are here from our project would simply sign this, I would say, what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
May I? I just so it's Anna and Katre, and I just wanted to share with you one link to virtual exhibition which was done in Estonia by one artist. So actually, this presentation and this site event inspired me to share it with you. And so to come to the issue which was just discussed. So this exhibition, it was like on-site exhibition in our central art hall in Tallinn, but unfortunately was affected by COVID lockdown. And then, the artist created also a virtual exhibition. So you may look at this. And this is not about right wing, but about victims of domestic violence. And so just to add something to the issue of trust. So the artist who did this exhibition is actually a daughter of women who is leading a shelter for women. And this exhibition actually a result of joint work. So this artist was part of different support groups and events organized for victims of domestic violence. So she actually was as a part of the process which allowed to build this trust and then to express those voices of victims. For some parts of this exhibition, so victims also contributed to it. So they like created it as a group. So this is kind of artist work, group therapy, and everything resulted in this exhibition.